Chapter 1, Preliminaries. Let it be said from the beginning, a strict moral discipline must be kept to make progress in meditation. And the additional minor rules. 2. Restraint of the senses, that is, not reacting, neither liking nor disliking. When there is contact between any of the 6 sense organs, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, and its object, form, sound, and so on. 3. Purity of livelihood, which means earning one's living in a way beyond reproach. 4. Morality with regard to the 4 requisites, which means making use of the 4 requisites, clothing, food, dwelling, and medicine, with mindfulness and wise discrimination, although this account of morality under 4 headings is not found until well after the Buddha's time. It is not out of keeping with the spirit of his teaching and can well be made use of as a guide to practice. The meditator should grasp the spirit of moral discipline, though the monk cannot memorize all the major rules of the Patimokkha, let alone the details of the various minor rules. If he grasps the spirit of the moral practice and keeps to it, he is very well established in morality. Herein lies the significance of the moral practice. The essence of the ascetic discipline consists in contentment with the means of supporting life, that is, the 4 requisites, and unlimited endurance in practicing. Here is an illustration of contentment with respect to food. Food is to be got in simple way, which for a bhikkhu means going out to receive alms. On his alms round, the bhikkhu must not select houses where he expects to get better food, but must go from house to house without missing any. He should eat from one vessel only, take food only once a day, not eat food received after he has begun eating, and so on. But he should not take into account only the rules of conduct actually prescribed.
Any mode of conduct that results in less trouble and involvement and conduces to progress in the practice ought to be adopted. As to clothing, the bhikkhu is advised to make his robes out of cloth that is of no use to others, which means collecting discarded cloth and making what are called ragrobes. In addition to his usual 3 robes, a bhikkhu is allowed one other piece of cloth for bathing during the rainy season. If he lacks this bathing cloth, he may bathe without it, an example of contentment with regard to clothing. As to dwelling, a bhikkhu is supposed to live in a forest, in the open air, at the foot of a tree, in a graveyard, or if need be, as, for instance, during the rainy season, in any other place offered. Here the ascetic discipline consists in not owning any dwelling whatsoever, in being content with whatever is available, and in enduring all kinds of weather. As in the matter of food and clothing, the essential point is this: the meditator should adopt any mode of conduct, prescribed or not, that is conducive to success in the practice. With regard to medicine, no specific mode of conduct is laid down, for the simple reason that medicine does not arouse covetousness or greed. After all, no one normally takes medicine unnecessarily, though in this modern age, this is no longer so true. There are now available medicines, such as cosmetics, which are consumed quite unnecessarily, just for the sake of fashion. Others, which are genuinely for curing ailments, are on sale in great variety to suit individual taste. The meditator should use only the type of medicine genuinely needed. He must be circumspect and contented as regards the use of medicinae, as befits a person practicing Dhamma. There is another special kind of ascetic discipline, the last of the traditional 13, which is especially designed to render the meditator adamantine, to strengthen his endurance. Its immediate object is avoidance of the pleasure of sleep. The meditator is advised, at times, not to lie down to sleep at all. Here moderation must most definitely be observed. From this outline, it is clear that the ascetic discipline has been added to that of morality in order to strengthen both mind and body, a function which is, of course, beyond the range of morality alone. Nevertheless, ascetic discipline and morality must go hand in hand as the foundation for meditation. Meditation, morality, and ascetic discipline are in fact inseparable. The moral and ascetic disciplines are to be regarded as a practice of the most general kind, to be applied at all times as the essence of right living. Having summed them up briefly, we shall now deal with the practices specifically related to the development of concentration, samadhi, dhyan. We discuss first of all the so-called preliminaries, pababhagaga. These preliminaries are things to be done before actually beginning the meditation practice. Though a later addition, quite unknown in the days of the Buddha, the preliminaries represent a widely and faithfully practiced tradition, and are considered of some importance. The fact that they are a later addition does not mean that they are of no use. The meditator must recognize the preliminaries as a part of the practice, though he must take care not to become blindly attached to them. As so many people do these days, certain of the practices contained in the preliminaries are so strictly followed nowadays in some centers that to dispense with them would be unthinkable. We shall now discuss the preliminaries one by one. 1. Paying respects to the bhikkhu in charge of the training center. In the days of the Buddha, bhikkhu in charge of training centers did not exist. And training centers in the modern sense did not exist either, since the would-be meditator used to go and take up residence near his own preceptor and teacher.
The main purpose of this ritual as now practiced is to create mutual understanding between the meditator and the bhikkhu in charge. It gives the bhikkhu in charge a chance to learn what kind of person the meditator is, what particular imperfections he has, what sort of character he has, what facilities he will need for his practice, and so on. Having convinced himself of the genuineness of the meditator's motives, the bhikkhu in charge will be quite willing to help him in every way possible. Here the main thing is the practice of Dhamma and not mere externals, not the observance of the custom as such. If there is some point on which the two just cannot come to an understanding, the meditator had better find some other training center. Pay respects is the first thing to be done on arriving at a new center, and it need be done only the once. Thereafter bhikkhu in charge and meditator have to live together, agreeing to help each other out of mutual goodwill. 2. Paying respects to the meditation teacher. The meditator should pay his respects to his instructor regularly throughout the whole period of training. In the days of the Buddha this was not regarded as a mere ritual but as something conducive to genuine respect for and reliance on the teacher. If the meditator considers that this ritual bowing down to the instructor and paying of respects is of no value, he should not perform it. To do so would be a waste of time. Different individuals have different mental characteristics. A person practicing mental development must have a mental level well above that of ritualism. Otherwise he is not mature enough to practice for the realization of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-selfhood, which are most subtle things to penetrate, but the accepted procedures relating to mental training have been modified in the course of time, owing to various kinds of worldly attachment, and nowadays affect everyone.
The result is that such formalities as the ritual paying of respects to the teacher and the making of devotional offerings to him have come to be regarded as essential. An earnest meditator must realize all this and act in the way most conducive to his own mental well-being. At the same time, he must not look down on others who have not as yet transcended ritualism. Nowadays such preliminary formalities are increasing in popularity, but only among people who have nothing more than faith. They are no longer practiced by discerning people. Training centers are established to meet the specific needs of certain types of people. And some centers have degenerated, to the extent that they are making a business out of providing people with the ritualism they crave for. The meditator must respect and trust his teacher so that he can give full attention while being instructed. If he has not enough respect for and confidence in the teacher, he will listen only half-heartedly, not giving much thought to the teacher's words. Here at the very beginning lies a root cause of failure. So mutual understanding is of the utmost importance. Just to pay one's respects by prostrating 3 times is not enough. The meditative teacher, for his part, should examine the trainee as thoroughly as a doctor would his patient. In an atmosphere of sincerity, respect, and confidence, the disciple will not be reluctant to talk frankly about his particular disease, mental imperfections, so that the teacher can administer his remedy. If there is a relationship full of father and son affection, everything will go smoothly. So the thing to be offered to the teacher as a token of respect is not something external, not just candles and incense, but rather an open heart full of confidence and sincerity. Something from within is to be offered. With such an offering there will be a close relationship between master and disciple, which will be conducive to success in the meditation practice.
Here is a Zen story which provides food for thought. A certain bhikkhu was so earnest and keen to learn the way of practice from the great Bodhidharma that to prove his earnestness he cut off one of his hands. Only after this proof was Bodhidharma prepared to teach him. The bhikkhu had previously begged to be taught dozens of times, but Bodhidharma had remained sitting, face to the wall, without opening his mouth. This exemplary Zen story is more than 1,000 years old, and it is not the only one of its kind. Even these days similar stories are told. We hear of people seeking instruction being tested and examined as to their zeal and earnestness in different ways peculiar to the different training centers. In some centers, for example, the seeker is made to sit on the steps, sometimes for 2 days and nights, sometimes for 3. And in some cases for as long as 7 days and 7 nights. Moreover, he may have to sit in a certain posture without the least movement. He may have to remain prostrate, for instance, until such time as the instructor responds to his request to become a student. Compare this endurance test with the mere paying of respects by offering flowers, candles, and incense, which we consider adequate. So let the truth seeker understand the real significance of these customs and rituals and act in the way most conducive to his own well-being. 3. Paying homage to the Triple Gem, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, the lighting of candles and incense in the shrine room in homage to the Triple Gem when formally receiving the meditation object or each time before starting to practice is yet another kind of devotional offering. Some people perform it as enthusiastically as if without it everything would be ruined. In this practice too the chronic disease of attachment to ritualism lingers on. How can a practice aimed at higher wisdom, supramundane wisdom, have anything to do with candles and incense? The explanation is as 4, 1, and 2, above. This practice of paying homage to the Triple Gem is usually motivated by clinging. A person who has really given his heart to the Triple Gem may light candles or not. To him it makes no difference, but if one is going to light candles and incense, one should not waste time making a big fuss about it. It has to do with social custom rather than with the practice of meditation. In the days of the Buddha meditators, especially the disciples of the Buddha, had nothing to do with candles and incense. They never bothered to take candles and incense along with them to the forest to light before beginning their practice. The meditator should consider well and decide what he will do in a case where this custom is being observed collectively by a number of people. In making his decision, he should have in mind his own convenience and at the same time avoidance of distraction and social friction. The buying of candles and incense and lighting them each time before beginning to practice shows in itself that this custom is typical of amateur meditators, people for whom the practice is only a passing fad. The meditator who is earnestly devoted to the practice, who practices continuously, like clockwork, in every posture, day and night, while awake and while asleep, will hardly have the time to make arrangements for lighting candles and incense each day. Let the meditator light candles in his own mind so that it is full of the brightest light day and night, whether he is awake or asleep. If he is earnestly devoted to the practice, let him not be concerned with buying or collecting candles and making extra trouble for himself. 4. Confessing offenses, for bhikkhu, and taking the precepts, for lay follower, before beginning to practice. This is normally done regularly, as if a bhikkhu were always full of offenses against the Patimokkha. To go through the actions of confessing without having actually committed any offense is once again mere ritualism. Think a moment.
Supposing a bhikkhu had committed a really serious offense, what then, is he to perform the same act of confession? If so, surely that act of confession would be an all the more meaningless ritual. Every bhikkhu should already be without fault or offense before beginning the practice. He should not have anything to confess. Performing the ritual of confession is, then, merely exhibitionism, a display of formalism or ritualism, the like of which never existed in the days of the Buddha. Such performances are time-wasting and distracting, if not disgusting. The taking of the precepts by laymen before the practice is to be interpreted in much the same way. This ritual is not found even in post-canonical works such as the Path of Purification, Visuddhimagga, let alone at the time of the Buddha himself. The real meaning of confession and taking of the precepts is this: in order to practice mind training, the meditator must be pure in word and deed, so that he has no guilty conscience to disturb him. If he does have guilt feelings, his mind will be restless and unable to concentrate. He must first know how to adjust himself mentally so that the mind is steady and at ease. If he has done some wrong and his mind is harassed by guilt feelings, he must be intelligent and acknowledge his wrongdoing. A perfunctory confession or taking of the precepts before beginning the practice is ridiculous. The right thing for the meditator to do in this case is determine to solve the problem once for all, so that it will not come to trouble his mind during the practice time. Presumably a person whose temperament is dominated by belief, a follower of one of the theistic religions for instance, would confess his sins to the priest, who is supposed to receive the burden of sin on behalf of God, and with his mind thus purified begin practicing meditation. But if sins can be neutralized merely by being confessed, why practice meditation at all?
The Buddhist practice of meditation is based on insight. The only way to overcome evil conditions is to develop insight by practicing meditation. Merely relying on ritual or belief will not help. Our perception of evil must be perception with insight. We must know what is the root cause of evil and how that cause can be eradicated. Knowing this, the mind will be pacified, calm enough to practice meditation. We have to be fully aware. We have to confess our faults all the time. We have to really see our faults as faults, seeing them together with their inherent dangers, and determined to improve ourselves by the power of insight. Then when the time comes to practice to achieve this result, the mind will be vigorous, enthusiastic, fit for practice. No feeling of remorse will cloud the mind. It will not recoil or become restless and distracted. Thus the meditator will succeed in his concentration, gradually developing it along with the power of insight. Seen in this light, the ritual of hurriedly confessing faults and taking the precepts just before beginning the practice is a farce. Utterly devoid of rhyme or reason, people attached to this ritual belong in the category of dabblers, amateur meditators. On the other hand, if the meditator deems it desirable to perform this ritual in order to avoid disharmony with others, he may do so. But in reality he has to be aware of his faults all the time, and practice meditation day and night in order to overcome them. 5. Submission to the Triple Gem. Another ritual that has come into existence is that of giving oneself up to the Buddha or to the Triple Gem. In this ritual Pali phrases are intoned, such as Imaham Bhagava Adabhavam Tumhakam Parakajami, which means here, O Blessed One, I dedicate myself to thee. This kind of ritual serves only to boost egotistic feelings. It never existed in the days of the Buddha. The extent to which this ritual is meaningful at the present day has to be carefully weighed up.
Since the feelings of a person submitting himself to the Triple Gem cannot be known to another. If the ritual is performed merely to copy other people, or out of attachment to self, to me and my karma, or if it is just a form of flattery based on the hope of getting something in return, then it does nothing but feed and strengthen one's blind faith, which is, of course, a great hindrance to progress towards supramundane wisdom. The only rational way to dedicate one's life and one's whole being consists in genuinely recognizing the excellence of the Dhamma, seeing nothing superior to the Dhamma, and being genuinely intent on the practice. This is true submission. It has nothing to do with any kind of ritualism or formalism whatsoever. Like confession of faults, submission to the Triple Gem ought to be practiced all the time. It should not be a mere gesture that the meditator performs just when he is about to practice. There are some people who have previously had no idea of submission to the Triple Gem, but who decide, on the spot, all of a sudden, to perform this rite of submission just in order to be with the crowd. For such people the crowd apparently carries more weight than does the Triple Gem. Such people have everything back to front, they are not ready for the practice of meditation. Their foundation is thoroughly unsuitable for the building of anything lofty and delicate. It is essential that the meditator should have submitted himself already, and that he have full confidence in the Triple Gem. Only then will his mind be full of the enthusiasm needed to carry him through the practice. 6. Submission to the teacher. There is in some centers a very strict rule concerning the ritual of submitting to the teacher, to be performed either in private or in public. Here again different Pali phrases are used for different cases. One commonly used formula is, Imaham Akariya Adabhavam Tamakam Parakajami. Here, O teacher, I dedicate myself to thee.
To submit oneself in this way with sincerity means that there is at least faith, sadhana, dependence and acquiescence, which for a man of devotional disposition is of some value. As for the teacher, he is rather practical about it all. He observes the behavior, manners, mentality, and disposition of the pupil rather than just trusting his words. In certain centers, this ritual is designed to create a relationship based on materialistic interests. And it has in fact been claimed that this ritual, which is of later date, was instituted and maintained purely in order to take advantage of pupils in one way or another. Teachers in olden times, not having any such ritual, were fortunately immune to such charges. They held, in accordance with the principles laid down by the Buddha, that nirvana, that is to say, guidance towards nirvana, must be given free and with open hands. They recognized that nirvana is nobody's property, belonging only to nature, and so they had no compelling rituals of this sort. Meaningless in itself, this ritual of submission to the teacher is nothing but an obstacle to the attainment of nirvana. It is contrary to the spirit of the teaching that one is one's own refuge, atahayatano natho. If a would-be meditator has no confidence in a teacher, or if, after inquiries and personal observation, he considers a teacher of no help to him, then he should not waste time and trouble on this ceremony of submission. The important thing is for teacher and disciple to understand each other well. Once they have come to understand each other, any performance or ceremony becomes immaterial. If a person feels like performing the ritual of submission to the teacher, he may as well do so. If not, why bother? Think this over and you will see that it is precisely such ritualism that makes people of other religions, who have a leaning towards Buddhism, shake their heads and lose interest.
They look down on such ceremonies as naive, animistic, fit only for Stone Age man. Such ceremonial conforms more with the faith-based doctrines of theistic religions than with the spirit of the Buddha's teaching. Based as it is on insight and aimed at destroying attachment to me and mine. So if the meditator does perform this ceremony of submission in order to avoid friction with other people who still cling to it, let him do so, fully aware, however, that it is merely a ceremony and has nothing to do with the spirit of Buddhism, which is opposed to all irrational submission. What is really needed is a close bond of friendship between disciple and teacher, which allows the teacher to use harsh language while teaching, if need be, and to demand from the disciple anything he wishes in the way of practice. At a higher level, this close bond should be one of affection, based on reason, insight, and compassion. Teacher and discus ple should not, however, be too much attached to each other. They also should not lack confidence in each other, otherwise troubles may arise, which will be detrimental to the practice in general. The ceremony as discussed here is a low-level practice for people just introduced to Buddhism. In the days of the Buddha, there existed no trace of such ritual. It sprang up only when teachers of later days wished to formalize every step. 7. Asking for the meditation object. There exist set ways of asking for the object to be used for the mental training, for example, Nibbanasami Banti Sakakaranathaya Kamathna Dehi, which means, Venerable Sir, give me a meditation object by means of which to realize nirvana. This is, of course, similar in form to the ritual of taking the precepts. On thinking it over, we see that to ask for a meditation object or kamathana in the same way as one asks for the precepts reduces the status of the meditation object to that of the precepts.
This is, then, just another confidence-boosting ritual for the man of devotional temperament. The man of intelligent temperament would find the repeated performance of such rites against his disposition. This formal asking for the meditation object is mere ritualism devoid of any rational basis. Though it is true that it may be accompanied by worthwhile questions and answers regarding the object. Too much formalism becomes tiresome. The main reason why sectarian divisions develop is that some people do things which others consider ridiculous. So it is worthwhile to reassess how many rituals ought to be performed, in which situations, and by what type of people. Do not be attached to rituals and do not perform them unintelligently and superstitiously so that discerning people find it all ridiculous and the performer himself achieves nothing. Here it should be noted and borne well in mind that the destruction of superstitious clinging to rites and rituals, syllabata paramesa, happens to be one of the main objectives of the mental training. The Pali formula for asking for the meditation object was obviously designed on the lines of the procedure of asking for ordination, now popular in Ceylon but not known at the time of the Buddha. Ordain me for the purpose of realizing nirvana. This formula does have value insofar as it is in keeping with the spirit of meditation practice. It is a safeguard against wrong motives when asking for a meditation object. It reminds the meditator of the fact that the practice is intended for the sole purpose of realizing nirvana. People with the wrong motives meditate in order to enlarge the ego, to be reborn in some heaven, to attain some special status, or to become a superman and show off their personal attainments, or to gain name and fame, or to impress others. The meditator has to realize that to practice in order to attain psychic powers such as clairaudience and clairvoyance is to go astray.
The Buddha stressed time and time again that the life of renunciation proclaimed by him is solely for the attainment of freedom from suffering, for the realization of nirvana, and not for anything lower or other than this. The life of renunciation does not have as its ultimate aim the perfection of morality, or the attainment of concentration, or the gaining of the various kinds of knowledge and vision. The Buddha declared that all these superficial aspects of the life of renunciation are just chaff. Its ultimate aim is nirvana, which he likened to the kernel, the very essence. If the meditator takes these words of the Buddha seriously, nothing undesirable will happen. It is advisable that anyone who wishes to practice should acquire beforehand some understanding of nirvana, albeit a purely theoretical one. With the help of such an understanding, he can more directly concentrate on or aim at nirvana. The best thing is, however, for the meditator to have some insight into suffering and to wish to be free from it by whatever means, just as a man whose head is being held under water wishes at all costs to get his head out of the water to breathe. If a person wishes to be free from suffering as fervently as that man wishes to get his head above water, that is a sure guarantee that he will practice with right intention. So when the meditator formally asks for a meditation object saying, Nibbana, let him be fully aware of this, the true aim of the practice. Then the ritual will not be meaningless, it will serve as a constant reminder that the practice is meant only for the attaining of nirvana. 8. Inviting the meditation object. Some training centers and some people have become so strongly attached to ritualism that they have lost their common sense and actually personify various inanimate things. They give people to believe that each individual meditation object is a divine being, a god.
Not only that, they even personify and name the various experiences arising in the course of meditation practice. For instance, the various kinds of rapture, pity, are individualized under such names as the Venerable Uplifting Rapture, Fra Abhanga Pity, the Venerable Pervading Rapture, Fra Farana Pity, and the Venerable Mindfulness of Breathing, Fra Anapanasati. They go so far as to request this or that Venerable Sir of their choice to do them favors. As a result, there exist wordy invitation formulas which flatteringly list the attributes of the various divine beings and culminate in prayers for favor. All these practices tend to be animistic or tantric, concerned with spirits and ghosts. It is practices of this sort that result in the permanent splitting off of sections. This sort of personification is common even in the lands where Theravada is dominant, where it is claimed that Buddhism is flourishing and pure. It is even more pronounced in certain Mahayana sects, which have gone so far as to become confused with other religions and have assumed forms so strange that one cannot recognize them as Buddhist sects at all. Thinking it over, one sees that all these practices are worthless and belong with the defilements of craving and attachment. Insofar as they do satisfy, it is only because they conduce to faith. The practice of personifying is, then, just one more form of ritual. It conflicts with the way of practice that existed at the time of the Buddha, which was based exclusively on wisdom and was far removed from the defilements of craving and the like. If there is to be any inviting, the meditator would do better to invite himself by arousing himself to be determined, enthusiastic, and energetic. He ought to invite himself to be mindful at all times, and in particular, to develop within himself the four bases of success, idhipita, namely zeal, energy, willpower, and investigation. If he has invited himself in this manner, his practice will bear fruit just as if he had been successful in inviting the meditation. Object to bless him. Personification of the Dhamma by meditators in olden days seems to have been simply a means of teaching Dhamma at a certain time and place, and to a certain group of people who by nature believed everything to be possessed of magic power. Such beliefs are now outmoded. 9. Radiating loving kindness. Metta. The custom of radiating loving kindness towards all living beings before beginning the practice proper has been handed down to us through many channels, some based on reason and insight and some on faith and superstition. But the method of radiating loving kindness, and the word used while doing so are constant. The most commonly used formula is, may all creatures, all living things, all beings, be free from hatred, difficulties, and troubles. And may they live in happiness. Anyone who radiates loving kindness out of superstition or fear has the wrong motivation altogether. He radiates loving kindness because he has been told that unless he does so the spirits are likely to create trouble, or the hungry ghosts will want a share of the merits, or the celestial beings will not help and support him. In such a case, the practice is wrongly motivated and completely out of keeping with its intended purpose. Sometimes the names of particular spirits of celestial beings are mentioned towards whom the loving kindness is being radiated, in the hope that they may in their turn help the performer of the rite. Thus people pray and curry favor, using loving kindness and the resulting merits to bribe those supposedly able to help. It is only through fear that such forms of practice have come into existence, and the original objective of the practice lost sight of. Some forms of radiating loving kindness are phrased in an amusing way. For instance, may I be happy, free from suffering hatred, difficulties,
and troubles, and may I live in happiness. This really reflects fear and self-love on the part of the speaker. How could a person with such a weak mind ever put forth the effort necessary to realize impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-selfhood? With this kind of ritual he will only disturb his mind all the more, that some people on a strict meditation course see dreadful visions and become mentally deranged or even go completely mad as most. Probably due to fear of this kind, some people are so attached to wrong ideas, so misguided, that they become frightened without reason. To practice meditation in a state of fear is bound to result in conflict, which may in turn lead to mental derangement. The meditator must understand the true meaning of radiating loving kindness before beginning to practice it. Only then can he profit by it and avoid these conflicts and troubles. In radiating loving kindness towards all beings including his enemies, the meditator should reflect. Now I shall not cherish any feeling of enmity against anyone, I shall give up all enmity. Even if someone is doing me harm or even trying to kill me, I will bear no malice. In this way he will always be free from fear, even if he is practicing in a lonely, unprotected place. He should feel also that he is everybody's friend, or that everybody is his partner in the enterprise of mental development. Because his practice is intended to end the suffering of all beings as well as of himself. The meditator should think of all beings surrounding him as friends who fully support his practice. 10. Reciting the virtues of the Triple Gem. At some meditation centers the meditator is required to recite the virtues of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha before beginning the practice. The three famous formulas, beginning with the words Itipiso, Svakato, and Supatipanno, are generally recited without thought for their meaning. Some people have no idea of their meaning, so that the reciting of them
becomes another mere ritual, and in some cases it even becomes a superstition, when people invoke the virtues of the Triple Gem to protect themselves during the practice. They actually believe the Triple Gem has some strange power and regard the Pali phrases as holy, magical formulas. If, however, a person recollects sincerely and faithfully the virtues of the Triple Gem, rather than just reciting or chanting them, in order to develop joy and delight in the practice, that is, of course, in order. The meditator who wishes to observe this custom should be sufficiently careful and discriminating not to take this reciting of the virtues of the Triple Gem as an invocation to some powerful spirit or ghost. He should not superstitiously make the Buddha into a supernatural being. The meditator should reflect that I have been living a righteous life up to now, unhindered. Favored with the chance to practice for higher achievements, is all due to the virtues of the Triple Gem. Henceforth I shall live my life in conformity with the Triple Gem. I shall attain the ultimate goal of life by devoting my whole being to the Triple Gem. Recollecting the virtues of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha in this way, he will have the joy, delight, zeal, and energy to practice earnestly. 11. Resolving to practice. This custom is meant to strengthen the willpower and make the meditator more firm and resolute in his practice. He should make himself feel at ease by recollecting that all the Aryans or noble ones, including the Buddha himself, have trodden this very path of practice that he is now about to follow, should say inwardly, the practice by way of which the Buddha and his disciples have attained nirvana is mindfulness, the one and only way, which each individual must follow for himself. Having thus reassured himself that mindfulness or satipatthana, which he is about to practice, is the one true way, the meditator firmly resolves to persevere in his practice.
This is the sole objective of this custom, but people who are attached to the idea of magical powers cannot help twisting the meaning of even this custom. They take it as a sort of submission, which is of course completely wrong. Apparently an ever-present instinctive need to change and distort the meaning of good customs exists in people who are timid or superstitious. This distortion of a meaningful custom demonstrates clearly how beliefs motivated by desire and based on misunderstanding can never lead to the highest insight. Resolving to practice is something the meditator must definitely do in order to strengthen his willpower and prepare himself to practice seriously. He must receive full instructions concerning the meditation object given him and be sure it is suitable for his particular kind of mental imperfections and suffering and able to solve effectively his various problems. Only when he has such an understanding and confidence will his resolve to practice be meaningful. This way of strengthening willpower is required not only for the practice of mental training but for doing any kind of work at all. But as a preliminary to mental training, it is based on precise and definite principles. The more the trainee studies, and especially the more he practices, the more his willpower is strengthened, so that he has no difficulty living up to his resolutions. For the trainee to look to the Buddha or anyone else to help him keep his resolution to practice is once again mere superstitious ritualism. He must move ever forward, never backward into the abyss of ignorance, never living in the world of magical powers. Every step of the meditator's practice must be guided by all the reason, intelligence, and insight he has at his disposal. 12. Paying homage to the Buddha by way of practice. This custom is observed every day or each time when the practice is over. The meditator, so to speak, makes his practice his offering in homage to the Buddha or the Triple Gem.
This is Padapati Puja. Paying homage by practice. It is the highest kind of homage and contrasts with Amisa Puja, paying homage by offering material gifts. Each time when the practice is over, the meditator recites 3 times, Amayadamanudama Padapati Puja Budham Dhammam Sangham Pujimi. I pay homage to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha by practicing Dhamma in conformity with Dhamma. Clearly this custom was designed in conformity with the Buddha's words, praising the person who pays homage to him by way of his own practice rather than by offering gifts. Meditation is the highest form of practice, so for a meditator to observe this custom is praiseworthy and rational, unless of course he follows it blindly and just for the sake of tradition. This Padapati Puja is the last thing to be done each day when the practice is over. Of the various customs and rites so far discussed, some can be seen to have come into being as a result of the imperfections and desires of teachers and their disciples, who have either introduced new rites of their own or have changed existing ones to suit their own beliefs and wishes. The meditator must carefully judge these various rites, keeping in mind the true purpose of meditation. Only then can they be conducive to success in his practice, and not just blind faith or superstition. Unless the meditator discriminates in this way, these rituals may conflict with the development of insight, creating unnecessary trouble for him, making him the laughingstock of discriminating people, or even, in an extreme case, sending him mad. If the meditator is not careful and circumspect in this matter of traditional practices, it will harm not only himself, but the Buddhist religion as a whole. To sum up, the practices classed as preliminaries to the mental training proper are not by any means all mere ritualism, provided their significance is correctly understood.
Some of them are duties incumbent on the meditator, and some are techniques for strengthening the mind so that it can make smooth progress. Each practice has its own virtue, its own purpose. The meditator must be cautious and try to discern the true meaning of each of them. In applying the techniques particularly designed to strengthen willpower, the meditator must, if he is to achieve success, be well aware of his own mental makeup or temperament. He may use techniques other than those mentioned here, such as reflecting on death, or on the limited time he has in which to attain the best thing attainable by man, or on the virtues of his benefactors, for instance his parents, or on his duty to practice earnestly for the sake of others, to spread the Dhamma and, by way of example, to guide others along the path to freedom. All such devices may be resorted to in order to strengthen the mind. The important point is, however, that the meditator should feel certain that he is doing just what he ought to be doing, and doing it properly. All these preliminaries have to be taken into account by the person preparing himself to practice meditation. End of Chapter 1.
Chapter 2, Environment. The trainee in anapanasati must have a clear idea of the practice as a whole, deriving what help he can from metaphors. The teachers of old were very fond of metaphors. For instance, in his introductory verse the writer of the Path of Purification, the Suddhimagga, describes the practice as follows. The wise man, standing firm on the ground, takes up the edged weapon in his hands, sharpens it on the stone, and, working diligently, succeeds in clearing away the thick jungle. The wise man is anyone with inborn insight, sahajatapanna, or what is nowadays called intelligence. This is an immature form of insight which has to be developed into true and genuine insight, vipassanapanna. The person who is to take up the mental training has to be sufficiently sharp to develop further intuitive insight. A dull person cannot take up the practice in the way dealt with here. As a rule, he is first to follow the way based on faith or resort to the various kinds of rites and rituals. Although possessed of intelligence, the meditator must stand firm on the ground of moral discipline, sila. He must be well established in moral discipline so as to be free from the coarser type of defects and free from suffering caused by the things about him. Moral discipline is compared to ground that is firm and solid enough to stand on securely, as opposed to muddy ground or treacherous, marshy ground. Anyone who earnestly wishes to undertake mental training, irrespective of whether he is a bhikkhu or a layman, must make the ground of morality clean enough to stand on. The edged weapon is worldly wisdom, the various kinds of understanding that come from study, especially those relating to mental development. By a process of sharpening, this mundane wisdom is transformed into supramundane wisdom, which is penetrating enough to put an end to the fetters, samyojana, and the inherent tendencies, anusuya.
The hands are pariharikapanna, operative insight, the type of insight that shows a person wandering on in sastra just what he has to do. It means natural insight so developed that one realizes exactly what has to be done and how to do it. The stone is concentration. Concentration must be practiced before insight. It is the basis for wisdom and insight, vipassana. Concentration, whether natural or consciously developed, is the stone on which the weapon is sharpened. Diligence implies the four bases of power, adhipata, which are willingness and earnestness in what one does. Determination, that is, taking the practice seriously, keen interest in the practice, that is, devotion to the practice from beginning to end without any deviation, spirit of inquiry accompanied by clear comprehension. To solve intelligently and in time any problem that may arise in the course of the practice. These four bases of power, aspiration, energy, concentration, and investigation, chanda, viriya, siddha, dhimas, are essential for success. The thick jungle is the tangle of mental defilements. These defilements pierce and prick just as does the thorny undergrowth in a thick jungle. To succeed in clearing away the thick jungle is to clear away the cluttering undergrowth of defilements as one would clumps of thorny bamboo. Thick and inextricably interwoven, these metaphors outline the way of practice and also clarify the interrelationships between the various wholesome qualities, morality and so on. They serve to clear up misunderstanding and also to give encouragement to practice. The wise man, standing firm on the ground, takes up the edged weapon in his hands, sharpens it on the stone, and working diligently, succeeds in clearing away the thick jungle. This formula must always be clear to the inner eye of anyone who practices. A person who has made up his mind to take up mental training has first to get rid of the impediments.
The impediments, palaboda, are physical things big and small that may tie the meditator down in various ways. The following are the 10 well-known examples of impediments. 1. Dwelling, avesa palaboda. Here the meditator is concerned about his dwelling, worried about where he is to live, and also about the comfortable monastery and quarters that he has to abandon in order to train in the forest or elsewhere. The impediment of dwelling even includes concern with responsibilities to the small hut in which one is to practice, such as getting rid of termites, mending a leaking roof, or anything else that may need taking care of. All these are impediments, obstacles in the way of the practice. The meditator must solve all of these problems completely right at the outset so that once he has started to practice there is nothing for him to be concerned about whatsoever. Clearly, then, it is better for a beginner to go and practice in a completely new environment where nothing belongs to him. Better still is to practice under a tree rather than in a hut, though the tree chosen must be in a secluded place where the meditator will not be disturbed by curious onlookers. He cannot find such a tree, he must just remain indifferent, taking no notice of anyone who may come to stare. Living under a tree gets completely rid of the impediment of dwelling. 2. Family, kula palaboda. This impediment consists in concern on the part of the meditator regarding his supporters, the people who maintain and help him in any way, worry about their perhaps being ill, missing them if unable to meet them every day, and so on. Affection and attachment to supporters is bound to be a cause of worry. The meditator must change his mental attitude in such a way that for him his supporters are, for the time being, as if no longer alive. 3. Worldly gain, labha palaboda. Here the meditator is afraid of losing advantages he had before taking up the practice.
Included under this impediment is the feeling of expectation of still more gain, name, fame, and so on after completing the practice. Taken together, these all amount to fear of loss. The meditator must clearly see gain, name, and fame as repulsive because detrimental to the practice for the attainment of nirvana on any level. While in training, the meditator must give up all possessions, past, present, and even future, and accept a life of poverty. If needs arise during the practice, he should not talk or think about them then and there, but should leave them to be dealt with later. 4. Social commitments, ganapalaboda. This impediment consists in concern about the people under one's authority, care, or responsibility. Such social commitments must be completely given up. The meditator must be firmly determined to live really alone. Although he is to go back to live in society at the end of the training, he must, until then, be free from all concern about such matters. 5. Work, kamapalaboda. Any kind of work left unfinished, for which the meditator is responsible, or of which he is extremely fond, or to which he is habituated, these are to be counted impediments. The meditator must reflect wisely and see clearly that no work is of importance other than the present practice of mental development. No work of trifling value must be given precedence over this, the most valuable and important work of all. Or if it is possible to solve in some way the problem of a trivial job, for instance by assigning it to some suitable person, then that should be done before beginning the practice. 6. Travel, adhana palaboda. Worry resulting from making journeys constitutes an impediment for two kinds of person. It is an impediment first of all, for anyone who practices while traveling. In this case, the meditator must not allow himself to be worried about anything related to his journey, such as where he is going to stay the following day, and the like.
The technique for eliminating this impediment is to feel as if one is traveling only a short distance. Secondly, it is an impediment for a person who trains while staying in one place, but who enjoys traveling to distant parts. Such a person must overcome his feeling of attachment to traveling. He should, for instance, be unconcerned about the season and about the weather, and should give no thought to this or that place as worth seeing, worth living at, and the like. Furthermore, he should not think about past trips which he enjoyed so much. And during the rain's retreat, he should not make plans about where to go after the period of retreat is over. 7. Relatives. Nadi Palaboda, concern about kith and kin, right from father and mother down to distant relatives, can be an impediment. The meditator must not allow concern about the happiness or unhappiness of relatives, far or near, to be a stumbling block in the way of his practice. If he earnestly intends to practice, he must not let himself be influenced in any way by such things. If a monk, he should recall that to be a monk is to renounce the world. Being a monk, he is understood to have completely renounced his relatives. He should further reflect that, especially during the training period, one must develop a sense of complete renunciation of everybody and everything. If a householder, the meditator should reflect that he is going in search of the very best thing for both himself and his relatives. Further, both monk and householder may reflect that no relative can help one to attain freedom from the vicious circle of samsara. In this, even the nearest relatives, parents, sons, daughters, cannot be of any help at all. Everyone has to help himself, and so should be given every chance to do so. Only a person who has freed himself from the round of samsara is in a position to help relatives still wandering on and on in samsara. No one can help others to become free if he is not to some extent free himself. 8. Sickness. Abada Palaboda. The meditator must not be afraid of possibly falling ill as a result of the unfamiliar way of practice and living he has adopted, and if he does fall ill while practicing, and if there is no possibility of his being cured, then he should cheerfully tolerate his condition and persevere in practice without caring for his life. The main thing is not to be worried about the possibility of future illness. The meditator should not worry about what may happen to his health, whether or not he will be able to get treatment, or where he will get medicine. He should not consider these matters of any importance. To practice mental culture is to take the medicine of immortality, which can cure the most dangerous disease of all, namely the disease of defilements and suffering. The Dhamma medicine guarantees permanent freedom from these diseases, and this each one can realize within himself. Anyone who is already in bad health should lose no time in getting cured so that he does not have to be concerned about treatment while practicing. If he has tried his best, using all ways and means, and has still failed to get rid of his illness, then he had better give up treatment and stop being concerned about it. The meditator must fight death by practicing mental development with determination and perseverance. He must be bold, mentally strong, and not let fear of illness and death find a place in his mind at all. He must keep up his practice as long as life endures. 9. Study. Gondha Palaboda. It is not practicable to practice mental development and study at the same time. If a person has decided to take up the practice of mental development in earnest, and if he wishes to attain the full result of the practice, he must suspend his studies. Note that the word study refers here to scholarly study. It does not include the kind of study that consists in asking a good friend or meditation teacher necessary questions concerning the practice.
Anyone who is addicted to bookish learning will definitely have to give up his attachment. Likewise, a teacher must give up any attachment to his teaching if he is to gain the full result of the practice. 10. Supernormal powers. Iti Palaboda. Some people become attached to the idea of gaining miraculous or magical powers, which they find very tempting. Anyone who is infatuated with the desire to possess supernormal powers and practices meditation specifically for this purpose may very easily become deranged. The meditator must get rid completely of any wish to possess supernormal powers. Only then will his practice proceed directly towards the noble paths and fruits, and to nirvana. This is how to get rid of the impediment of supernormal powers for those who have not yet started practice. A person who has been practicing sincerely and has reached the stage where his mind is capable of performing certain psychic wonders naturally feels a strong interest in them. He then begins to cherish a desire to divert his practice towards the attainment of supernormal powers of all kinds. This is a very strong obstacle barring the way of higher practice, which is aimed at bringing insight into the three universal characteristics. namely impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-selfhood. This insight must be attained in order that nirvana may be attained, and it is not possible to attain both nirvana and supernormal powers. Much as some may wish it is, however, possible that a person who has, through practice, attained to the highest truth may attain supernatural powers as well. As a byproduct, this is not a common phenomenon, it happens only to certain types of people under certain conditions. The way of practice leading to the attainment of supernormal powers is distinct and different from that leading to nirvana. And the two must not be confused. The meditator must be genuinely seeking nirvana and must not be after supernormal powers.
The attaining of supernormal powers is certainly a way of getting name and fame and wealth. But it is useless for the destruction of mental defilements. The 10 impediments just discussed are examples of stumbling blocks lying in the way of mental development. To fail to clear these obstacles away is to fail to find the stone of concentration on which to sharpen the blade of insight. And without a sharp blade, how can the jungle of mental defilements be cleared away? Clearing away the impediments is, then, a very important preliminary task that has to be attended to. The meditator must know how to choose the place and environment most favorable to his practice. To be able to do this, he must first of all know his own characteristics and know just what kind of environment is best suited to them. Although the training is aimed at the attainment of freedom, which implies neither liking nor disliking the environment, not being influenced by it. Nevertheless, a beginner must select his environment with some care. It is imperative, therefore, that the meditator should clearly understand the nature and mode of interaction of the environment and his own character or temperament. He must know whether or not the two go well together, and if they do go together, he must know just how and to what extent. Character or temperament is technically termed karita, which literally means behavior and implies a certain set of habit. Patterns acquired through repeatedly behaving or reacting in certain ways over a long period. Having recognized his own karita, the meditator is able to create or select a suitable environment and avoid unsuitable ones. The different character types or classes of temperaments are considered to be 6 in number. They are the lustful, raga karita, the hating, dosa karita, the dull, moha karita, the faithful, sada karita, the intelligent, buddhi karita, kama, and the speculative, vitaka karita. We shall now examine these 6 character types in turn and discuss the sort of environment suitable for each of them. 1. The lustful character type. This is the person whose mind is dominated by lust or desire. He feasts his eyes on anything beautiful and attractive, is very strongly attached to tidiness and orderliness. He is far too sensitive to the taste of food and very selective as regards mode and place of living. A person of this type is advised to select an environment that is untidy, dirty, and unsightly. His clothing should be of poor quality cloth and should be much patched, darned, and torn. Even his utensils should be of poor quality, dented, rough, and much mended. If the meditator is a bhikkhu, he should go for alms in a direction that is dirty and unsightly and where there is nothing pleasing to the eye. He should go to a poor locality where he will receive unattractive food, should select for his alms round a village where people are unsightly and shabby and give in a rough and unpleasing manner. As to posture, he should remain as far as possible in the postures of walking and standing and should avoid sitting and lying. He should take great care to apply the same principle to all other things, doing nothing that might arouse lust or strong attachment. The articles he uses should be colored blue or some similar dark hue. He wishes to use one of the color kasinas as his concentration object, he should choose the blue one. Sum up, all the different things the meditator of lustful temperament has to do with should be displeasing, ugly, unattractive, and rough. Since such qualities are suitable and favorable to his practice, he does not realize the importance of this whole matter. Difficulties will arise unnecessarily in one way or another with regard to his nature karita, and will be an obstacle of progress in his meditation. 2. The hating character type. This is the person who easily becomes angry, who is short-tempered and liable to become irritated without reason.
The environment recommended for this type is just the reverse of the one beneficial to the lustful type. It is recommended that the person of hating character type should create, or live in, an environment where everything is tidy, orderly, beautiful, and pleasing to the eye. His dwelling should be perfectly neat and clean, spick and span, free from anything irritating. His clothing should be of fine quality, of pleasing color, not smelly, and of smooth, superior material. If a bhikkhu, he should go for alms to a village that is very clean and tidy, and where the people are cultured and well-mannered. The environment he lives in should be in no way depressing, but suitably clean, orderly, and tidy. He should spend more time sitting and lying down than standing and walking. Other minor things should be arranged along the lines already indicated. As to color, he should give preference to dark green, the least stimulating of all the colors. 3. The dull character type. This is the type of person who is slothful and always feels sleepy and inactive. By nature, he is not at all lively or wide awake. It is recommended that the environment suitable to this type of person should be clear, bright, open, and spacious. The lodgings, for instance, should have a view rather than being shut in, and should be light and sunny. Clothing should be of fine quality. As for the hating type, food should also be as in the case of the hating type. The utensils and other objects used by the dull character type should be of large size. Even the kasina he concentrates on should be as large as he can make it. Out of the 4 postures, he is advised to remain in the postures of standing and walking more than in the other 2. 4. The faithful character type. This is the person who readily believes, trusts, accepts on faith alone without much understanding of the matter in question. For this type, all the directions given for the hating type apply.
In addition, it would be beneficial for the faithful type to live in an environment that stimulates his thinking power or intellect. He should also live near or associate with someone who can advise him and stimulate his imagination in the proper way. 5. The intelligent character type. This is the person who always wants to know, study, and think to increase his knowledge. For this type, there is almost no problem with regard to environment. All the directions given for the other types are suitable for the intelligent type since he can adapt himself to any environment. In fact, nothing specific need be said about him at all. 6. The speculative character type. This is the person whose mind easily becomes restless, but not in an intelligent way. His thinking is restless without having any direction or guiding principle. He wanders and is not certain of anything. The environment suitable for this type is one that does not stimulate or encourage thinking, and does not cause confusion and create further problems. His dwelling must be small, but neat and clean and sufficiently light. He should have only a few simple essential things, and should not associate with people who indulge in meaningless talk. All other things such as posture and color should be as for the lustful type. Summing up, the lustful type is dominated by desire and must use unpleasant things as an antidote. The hating type readily becomes angry, and must use clean, neat, and beautiful things as an antidote. The dull type is deluded. As an antidote, he needs spacious, open, bright living quarters. The faithful type believes too readily. For him the antidote consists in following definite and orderly principles. The intelligent type stresses understanding. He should use his own intelligence and think for himself. The speculative type should use as an antidote environmental conditions that stimulate thinking. When the meditator has examined himself and come to know his own nature or temperament correctly,
he will be able to select a suitable environment without much difficulty and thus be largely self-reliant in his practice. Moreover, he can even choose the concentration object best suited to his nature. If he is of the lustful type, he should use one of the 10 loathsome objects, a subhakamana. If of the hating type, one of the 4 sublime abodes, brahmavihara, or illimitables, apamana. The dull type should choose analysis of the 4 elements, katadatta bhavana. The faithful type should choose one of the 10 recollections, anapanasati, such as recollection of the Dhamma. For the intelligent type, these is no specification. The speculative type should choose an object of calming or pacifying nature, such as mindfulness of breathing or a kasina disc. The Buddha did say, however, that mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati, is suited to every character type. If a person shows a variety of temperaments, he should, in selecting his meditation object, consider first the dominant one. Then he can consider the next strongest, having dealt with the conditions inside, that is, the different character types, we must now speak about conditions outside. As a guide to selecting a suitable environment, we shall discuss the so-called Sappayadhamma, or things beneficial to the practice. They are reckoned as 7, namely, suitable dwelling, resort, speech, people, food, climate, and posture. Besides being suited to the character type as discussed above, the dwelling selected should be as follows. Not too big, otherwise it will require too much care, not too new, otherwise a lot has to be done to maintain it, not dilapidated, for a dilapidated building presents danger both in itself and in the form of the reptiles and other vermin it harbors, not on a roadside, in order to be free from disturbance from traffic and visitors, not near a public well or
tank, to be free from disturbance by people coming to drink or draw water, especially people of the opposite sex, not near a place where edible leaves and vegetables grow, for otherwise there will be disturbance from people collecting them, especially people of the opposite sex, and not at a place where there are useful flowers and fruits, for the same reason. It should not be a famous shrine, since it would then be frequented by pilgrims coming to pay homage. It should not be near a city, because a city is a source of all manner of disturbance and inconvenience. And not near a source of firewood or near arable fields, since there would probably be disturbance from noise or the people themselves. Preferably it should not be near things or persons that are in any way unsuitable, such as hot-tempered people, members of the opposite sex, and so on. It should not be near a landing place, because their people are constantly coming and going, not too far up country, since the people there may not be disposed to give support and may even misunderstand and give trouble, and not on the frontier of the kingdom, since that area is strictly checked by the authorities in charge. And there would be the possibility of the meditators being adversely affected in case of a border conflict. Lastly, the dwelling should not be in a place where the 7 suitable things are unavailable and where neither a good friend nor a meditation teacher can be contacted. All these examples of things to be avoided provide a basis for deciding on the best place to stay, particularly in the case of a bhikkhu. When the meditator has found a place free from all these faults, he is said to have a suitable dwelling. The term suitable dwelling may imply a whole village, a whole forest, a whole monastery, or a part of it, or just a single hut, cottage, a cave, the foot of a tree, a valley, or even the meditator's own room. Briefly put, the meditator should live in a place free from disturbance and
favorable to the practice of mental development. 2. A suitable resort is a place where the meditator can conveniently obtain his food and such other necessities as facilities of communication, especially those required for his practice. The important point about the resort is that food should be obtainable there without too much difficulty, and that there should be no unfavorable objects, particularly to be avoided are objects poisonous to the mind, the sort that harm the mind, objects that depress, that may lead to ruminating over past experiences and perhaps eventually bring about a return to the worldly way of life. The commentaries compare the meditator looking for a suitable resort to a cow looking for a suitable pasture. 3. Suitable speech is speech that is conducive to success. It is talk that is good and profitable, talk that may resolve doubts and encourage the meditator to practice. Talk that is agreeable to his temperament. Even the calls of certain kinds of animals may or may not be agreeable, let alone the talk of human beings. Noisy and clamorous sounds, and also alluring sounds, are to regarded as unsuitable. By contrast, talk that encourages and gladdens the meditator, that strengthens and inspires him in his practice, will add to his knowledge and understanding of his duty and is to be considered suitable. Most particularly are the words of a good friend to be regarded as suitable speech. 4. Suitable people, the people around the meditator, teacher, friends, fellow trainees, and supporters. Both men and women are suitable if they are able to get on well together and live in harmony. The function of the teacher is to uplift the meditator. The function of his companions, his fellow wayfarers, is to provide company for him and make him feel secure. The function of the lay supporters is to help him along so that he makes Quick and smooth progress, this is what is meant by suitable people.
5. Suitable food is food that suits the temperament of the meditator in the ways mentioned above under character types. To be suitable, the food must nourish the body and protect it from illness, and of course the meditator must eat it correctly. Mindful of its true purpose, whether the food is to be vegetarian or not, whether it is to include fruit or starches, and so on, depends on time, place, and personal preferences and ideas. No general rule can be laid down for all people, but if the food the meditator gets is just what his body and mind require, that food is to be regarded as definitely suitable. 6. Suitable climate implies a favorable season, a time of year that provides good environment, good scenery, good weather, and the like. The choice of climate will be made under either of two conditions: if the meditator is going to practice for only a limited period, or if he is about to practice for the first time, he should select the best season possible. In this case, there will be ample opportunity to select time and place. If, on the other hand, he is practicing continuously, he has very little choice. He may, however, select a season in which to practice one particular aspect of the training more strictly than usual. And in either case he may, if conditions permit, move to a locality where atmospheric conditions are such as to constitute suitable climate. The meditator may decide, for example, where he will live in summer, where in winter, and where during the rainy season. Or if he is not in a position to move from one place to another, he may adjust his residence in such a way as to achieve the same result. 7. Suitable posture is any one of the four postures, sitting, lying, standing, and walking, that is beneficial to the practice. Which particular posture is to be preferred can be discovered by personal experiment. The meditator must find out in which posture his mind can most easily become concentrated and remain so. Having found his suitable posture, he should keep to it. Once he has become proficient in concentration, he can use the remaining three postures as well so that he can develop one-pointedness, regardless of posture. Summing up, all these 7 suitable things are things immediately related to the meditator that are favorable to his practice. They can on no account be ignored. The 7 are, once again, abode, resort, speech, people, food, climate, and posture. The better the meditator is able to select them, the more cheerful and fresh he will be, the more free of tiredness and boredom with the practice. Hence, these 7 are recognized as things to be carefully studied and attended to. Chapter 3, Theoretical Background. 2 kinds of preparation are needed for the practice of meditation or mental development, bhavana. First, the meditator must have technical know-how, theoretical understanding. With a sufficient theoretical understanding, he is able to practice along the right lines, without going astray. Having prepared himself by studying the theory, the meditator can decide what kind of practical preparation is needed, and how much. Then he has to put it all into practice. The general theoretical points that the meditator must know have been listed under 8 headings, as follows. 1. What is concentration? This can be answered in various ways depending on whether one has in mind the actual work of meditation, the course of meditation, or the result of working on the meditation object. Any one of these 3 can be called concentration, samadhi. The definition of concentration given in the texts is this: a wholesome mind steadily fixed on an object. In this definition, concentration is considered as the result. The term concentration can, however, also cover the mental work that will give rise to this wholesome mind steadily fixed on its object. Actually, the term wholesome is much more important than steadily fixed on an object, because if the mind happens to be unwholesome,
then, even though it may be steadily fixed on an object, the result is wrong concentration. For this reason, the object used for the practice of concentration must be one that can serve as the basis for a wholesome mind. Furthermore, the motives for practicing concentration must be pure from the very outset, and, as mentioned before, must be based on insight and right view. 2. What is the technical meaning of concentration? Technically speaking, concentration is the firm establishing of the mind, citta, and the mental factors, cetasika. The mind is firmly established because the mental factors coexisting with it are wholesome and make it so established. The expression firmly established implies that the mind is fixed on one single object, not disturbed by any other object, and not dominated by any of the hindrances or defilements. 3. What are the characteristic, junction, manifestation, and proximate cause of concentration? The characteristic of concentration is non-distraction. Its function is overcoming of distraction, and hence the attainment of calm. Its manifestation is non-wavering, and its proximate cause is happiness. It should be remembered that there must always be satisfaction, ease, cheerfulness, joy, in a word, happiness. Happiness is the proximate cause of concentration. For how many kinds of concentration are there? This is a purely theoretical point, really just a matter of linguistic convention, and we need not concern ourselves with it overmuch. The following brief account will suffice for our purposes. Concentration may be regarded as of just one kind, namely, the state of mind which is firmly established on, or it may be regarded as of two kinds if we classify it as mundane and supramundane, or as access concentration and full concentration, upakara and anapanasati, and there are several other pairs of this type. Again, concentration is of three kinds if we classify it as inferior, medium, and superior.
We may also classify it into four kinds, each accompanied by one of the four bases of accomplishment, idhippada. And it is divided into 5 kinds on the basis of the jhana factors. All these classifications are of purely theoretical interest. 5. What is the defilement of concentration? In the language of the texts, the defilement of concentration is the state of mind that reverts to sensuality and the unwholesome. This is concentration on the mundane level, which can still relapse and deteriorate if not well guarded. 6. What is the cleansing of concentration? The answer is the state of mind precisely the opposite of the one just mentioned, in other words, a mind free from defilements and worries. Always radiant because accompanied by mental factors, satasika, belonging to the category of insight. 7. How is concentration to be developed? This is concerned purely with practice. We shall deal with it in detail later and here merely sum it up briefly as follows. Purify conduct, eliminate the various impediments, approach a teacher in the right way, study well, receive a concentration object. Live in a place suitable for practice, remove minor impediments, and then develop the concentration object. This last will be dealt with in a separate chapter. 8. What is the benefit of concentration? The meditator must know in advance the benefit or fruit that will be obtained from what he is going to do. Such knowledge, apart from being a continual source of inspiration, is a necessary foundation, which helps prepare the way to the goal. Because concentration is of several kinds, the benefits derived from it are also various. In the texts we find that 5 benefits of concentration are listed. These are: A. Happiness here and now, ditha dhammika sukha. This is experienced by anyone whose mind is concentrated, but in particular by fully purified beings, arahants, kama, who enter concentration in order to rest.
B. Insight, vipassana. Each of the various states of concentration is a basis for insight, that is, seeing impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-selfhood so penetratingly that the mind is freed from clinging. C. Higher knowledge. This differs from insight. A person who has gained insight may not necessarily have higher knowledge. Far more preparation and concentration practice of a specific kind is necessary before higher knowledge can arise. Higher knowledge here refers to various kinds of psychic power, iddhividi, of a wholesome nature. D. Attainment to a supernormal plane of existence. This generally refers to the Brahma world, Brahmaloka. Concentration at all levels raises the mind to planes of existence higher than that of the sensual world, Kamaloka. But merely aiming for the Brahma world is not in keeping with the spirit of the Buddha's teaching, which aims at transcending existence, at completely destroying this circle of becoming. Unfortunately, the aims of pre- and non-Buddhist meditation practices are always being confused with the true and ultimate aim of Buddha-Dhamma. The meditator must understand this point and keep it in mind, because there is a possibility that, without realizing it, he may start craving for and clinging to life in the Brahma world. The danger of clinging is much greater here than in the case of C. above. E. Attainment of extinction, Nirodha Samapatti. This is the highest of all the extraordinary achievements. It can be described as a form of the happiness of freedom, Vimutti Sukha. This attainment is reserved exclusively for some types of non-returners, anagami, and for fully liberated beings, arahants. It is not to be aspired for by all, being inaccessible to the general run of people. There is, therefore, no need to discuss it here in detail. Although this list of 5 benefits was made by teachers of quite a late date, it is of value in helping a meditator to decide which kind of
concentration he is going to practice. Now we deal with the second aspect of preparation for the practice. Certain rules have been prescribed as a guide in preparing for the practice of mundane concentration, that is, concentration by persons other than Aryans, noble ones. 1. Purification of moral conduct. This means giving up any kind of conduct that leads to hesitation and self-reproach. This point has already been dealt with in Chapter 1 under Confession of Offenses and need not be discussed further. 2. Elimination of the various impediments. This too has been explained already, see Chapter 2. 3. Approaching a good friend, Kalyamitta, or meditation teacher. In the text's lengthy explanations are given on this point. But all those explanations apply to a particular place, period, and culture. Namely that of the country where the various manuals of practice were written. Hence, we cannot take all those explanations and apply them directly, to the letter. To insist on doing that would be superstitious and ridiculous, as we mentioned in the very beginning. Briefly, one must choose an appropriate time and place for contacting the teacher in order, first of all, to create a feeling of respect and trust, and secondly, to let him know just what one wants. Patience is recommended. It may even take some months before the various things have been carefully and subtly done by both teacher and disciple. Nothing should be done in a shortcut manner, as is the fashion these days. That things must be allowed to take their course is self-evident. For instance, it takes a long time for a teacher to get to know the temperament of his pupil. He can do this only if the pupil serves and attends on him over a period. Another thing to do is to find out how much opportunity there will be for contact with the teacher. If the disciple is to practice at the teacher's residence, there is no problem, since he can easily consult the teacher whenever doubt arises. But if he has to stay at a place far away, there must be preparation as to the instructions to be received, their quantity and frequency, all of which it is the teacher's duty to decide. Detailed advice has been given based on the way of life prevailing in olden days. It is said that the disciple should visit the teacher once every 2 days, every 3 days, or every 7 days after the alms round, and, having eaten at the teacher's, return to his dwelling place. This is how it was done in ancient times, in keeping with the way of life prevailing then. Such customs should still be taken into consideration nowadays, and adapted to present day needs to the best advantage. If the meditator lives far away in the countryside, he is advised first to make arrangement for receiving the concentration object, kamathana, and to contact the teacher afterwards in the proper way. It is up to us to adapt as necessary all these traditional practices. If all this is not arranged properly, confusion will arise, which will be difficult to deal with. Consider, for instance, the advice given in the ancient manuals regarding discussion between disciple and teacher. There it is advised that when speaking to each other, disciple and teacher should sit back to back at the foot of a tree. With the tree between them, and with their eyes closed, they should speak carefully, correctly, straightforwardly, and to the point, discussing only as much as is necessary. Then they should get up and leave without seeing each other's face at all. This is intended purely and simply to eliminate sources of disturbance as far as possible. Having understood the purpose of practices like this, one is in a position to make preparations for contacting the teacher. This creates good relations right from the time the pupil first meets the teacher and maintains them through the stages of receiving instructions and advice and discussing difficulties, thus ensuring unbroken progress.
4. Studying the concentration object, kamathana. Meditation objects are of 2 kinds, general and specific. General objects are for continuous use and are not changed. Specific objects are practiced in order to accomplish the desired result as quickly as possible. The former class are practiced every day and are chosen to suit the meditator's temperament. For example, a timid person should every day develop loving-kindness, metabhavana, kama. A person of lustful character type should daily practice meditation on repulsiveness, asavakamathana, kama. And a heedless and dull type of person should daily practice recollection of death, marananusati. All these general meditation objects are to be practiced daily before one of the specific ones is taken up. Apart from the main meditation object, the teacher decides which general object is suited to the pupil's personal needs. Every meditator should take up these two kinds of meditation object as the teacher recommends. 5. Suitable dwelling. We have already discussed at length the kind of dwelling suitable for a meditator, and there is no need to discuss it further. 6. Elimination of lesser impediments. There are certain small jobs that the meditator should attend to before beginning to practice so that he will not need to worry about them again. Such things include having his hair cut, shaving, burning out his bowl, mending, washing, or dyeing his robes, taking purgative and the like as may be necessary for different individuals. The meditator should be free from worry and concern about all these things for as long as possible. 7. The actual practice of concentration. The meditator begins to practice according to the method he has been given and keeps it up until he reaches the goal. The details of this will be discussed later. Before going on to discuss the practice of mindfulness of breathing, we must pause to consider just why the breathing has been selected as the principal meditation object.
Understanding this point will make the actual practice easier. Mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati, is just one of the 40 traditionally recognized objects of meditation. These 40 are classified as follows. 1. The 10 kasinas, literally totalities. 1. Earth kasina. 2. Water kasina. 3. Fire kasina. 4. Air kasina. 5. Blue kasina. 6. Yellow kasina. 7. Red kasina. 8. White kasina. 9. Light kasina. 10. Space kasina. 2. The 10 loathsome objects, asabakamathana. 11. Bloated corpse. 12. Livid corpse. 13. Festering corpse. 14. Corpse cut open. 15. Gnawed corpse. 16. Scattered corpse. 17. Hacked and scattered corpse. 18. Bleeding corpse. 19. Worm-infested corpse. 20. Skeleton. 3. The 10 recollections, anasati. 21. Recollection of the Buddha. 22. Recollection of the Dhamma. 23. Recollection of the Sangha. 24. Recollection of virtue. 25. Recollection of generosity. 26. Recollection of divine beings, i.e. of their qualities. 27. Recollection of death. 28. Recollection, or mindfulness, of the body. 29. Recollection, or mindfulness, of breathing. 30. Recollection of peace, i.e. of nirvana. 4. The 4 sublime abodes, Brahmavihara. 31. Loving kindness. 32. Compassion. 33. Sympathetic joy. 34. Equanimity. 5. The 4 formless spheres, Arapayatana. 35. Boundless space. 36. Boundless consciousness. 37. Nothingness. 38. Neither perception nor non-perception. 6. 39. Repulsiveness of food, aherpaticulasana. 7. 40. Analysis of the 4 elements, Katadatavatana, with the 10 kasinas. The stress in on form, they are meant for training the mind in the psychic powers from the very beginning. The loathsome objects are primarily intended to overcome sensual lust. The 4 objects belonging to the formless spheres lead to what are called the formless absorptions, arupa jhana, high mental levels which, however, are not on the path to insight. Altogether there are 40 meditation objects. The reasons for selecting the one object, mindfulness of breathing, number 29, from among these 40 are as follows. 1. Mindfulness of breathing covers 3 of the 4 types of mental training, namely A. The practice leading to happiness here and now. B. The practice leading to knowledge and vision, nadasana, of the sort called divine. Namely divine ear and divine eye, dibasoda, dibakaku. C. The practice leading to awareness and clear comprehension, sati sampajana. D. The practice leading directly to the extinction of the inflows, asavakaya. Mindfulness of breathing covers completely the first, third and fourth of these types of mental training, but not the second, which has in any case nothing at all to do with the overcoming of suffering. Just how anapanasati covers these 3 types of mental training will be discussed in detail later on, or the meditator may prefer to wait and see this by himself as a result of having actually practiced it. None of the other meditation objects covers as wide a range of benefits as does mindfulness of breathing. 2. Mindfulness of breathing is very calm and subtle as regards both object and destruction of defilements. Other meditation objects, including mindfulness of body, kayagadasati, which is very similar to mindfulness of breathing, lack these qualities. Mindfulness of the body is calm and subtle only in destroying defilements. It is not calm and subtle as to object. By contrast, in mindfulness of breathing the object is calm and cool, comforting, not frightening, not repulsive, not difficult to work on. What is more, mindfulness of breathing can absolutely destroy the defilements. These are the qualities that make it so special. And mindfulness of the body the object is fear-inspiring, repulsive. The loathsome objects are even more so. Because mindfulness of breathing has such advantageous qualities, it was recommended by the Buddha himself as suitable for everybody.
He praised it as the meditation object through which all the noble ones, himself included, had achieved success and which they regularly practiced. 3. Further, mindfulness of breathing can be used throughout the entire course of training. There is no need to change from it to another meditation object. This means that by practicing mindfulness of breathing alone, the meditator can develop first of all concentration. Secondly, concentration accompanied by intuitive insight, and finally the highest intuitive insight, which eradicates the inflows, asava. Other objects of meditation, especially the kasinas, stop short at concentration. To go on and develop insight, the meditator has to change over to another object. But with mindfulness of breathing, when the meditator has developed fully all the 16 stages described below, he has completed both concentration practice and the insight practice. As mentioned above, mindfulness of breathing alone leads to 3 kinds of concentration in one. No other meditation object is as convenient and comfortable or as highly praised as this one. It is for these reasons that we have here selected anapanasati as the main meditation object to be studied and practiced. Now we shall pose the question, who should develop mindfulness of breathing? We find that in his discourses on this subject, the Buddha used the words, bhikkhus, in this teaching and discipline, Dhamma Vinaya. He was referring, then, to people studying in this teaching, people who have looked at the world, seen suffering in all clarity, and wish to make an end of that suffering. Only here in this teaching and discipline are there found the first ascetic, the second, the third ascetic, and the fourth. Majjhima Nikaya 11, in other words, individuals at the 4 stages on the way to freedom from suffering, namely, the stream enterer, the once returner, the non-returner, and the arahant, are to be found only in this teaching and discipline.